Okay, so yesterday, Kimberly Martin was on First Take as the show covered Tyreek Hill's recent comments, apologizing and taking a bit of the blame for how he came in so hot with the police officer. Stephen A. Smith has been covering this Tyreek Hill story quite a bit on First Take and on his own platform, and if I'm going to be honest, I have to agree with him. He outright called out the cops for not de-escalating the situation and criticized Tyreek for his attitude towards law enforcement. Anyways, listen to what he said that got Kimberly Martin all triggered. You can see from her body language that she was going to come in all hot on Stephen A. Smith afterwards. Have a listen.
Well, it was nice to hear him admit what he admitted. I give him props for that. I would have preferred that he'd done that initially because so many of us jumped out and supported him when we saw the initial video. And we haven't deviated from that because the officers were excessive and it was uncalled for a traffic stop to elevate to that point. But I like to remind everybody of the specifics because sometimes we tend to gloss over that. Let's take this into consideration. We know what kind of world we're living in. We know how unfair it is. We know how black people, especially black men, are stigmatized when it comes to dealing with police. We all understand that. So knowing that, and knowing that whether it's his uncle or his grandpa or whomever told him, like so many of us have been told, Jason, Kimberly,
Yep.
Roll down your windows, put your hand on the steering wheel, okay? And don't mouth off at the police officer. You know, the police officer who's a law enforcement official, who has a gun, who has a taser, who has a bulletproof vest, and is at complete advantage over you at that particular moment in time. Do everything that you can not to exacerbate the situation. When Tyreek Hill was pulled over, he left his windows up. The officer had to knock on the window. And he rolled it down a little bit and said, "Don't knock on my window like that. Don't knock on my window like that. Don't knock on my window like that." What did the officer say? Well, if you had your window down, I wouldn't have had to knock on the window. If you had it down. And everything took off from there. And so for me, no, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that that man, that officer had a right to drag him out of the car that way. But he said it. He could have handled things better. And the reason why that's important is because times that we're living in, it's not an exaggeration to say this. Tyreek Hill could have got himself killed. When you have that window up, they don't know what's on the other side of that window. You don't know how they would have reacted. So thank God everybody's safe and not additional harm came to the situation. But I'm very, very happy he acknowledged that he could have handled the situation better because he should have handled the situation better for his own sake, as well as those out there who look up to him and might want to emulate his actions.
Okay, so like I said, I agree with Stephen A. Smith that both parties were at fault here. However, I wouldn't have made it racial like he did, because you go on YouTube and you'll just see this is just how a lot of cops are. They can be assholes. A lot of them use excessive force, especially when you get mouthy with them. I'm not saying they're right, but they're human. Same thing happens in a courtroom, and if you get mouthy or disrespectful with the judge, you best believe they'll make your life harder in court and during sentencing. Anyways, there are a ton of videos circulating online where you have people who try and stand up to cops during traffic stops under the Know Your Rights narrative. I'm sure you've seen a lot of these videos before where the driver will continue repeating, "Can I leave now?" or "Am I being detained?" And if you look closely, they're people of all race. On top of that, you gotta put yourself in the position of a cop in America. This isn't Japan or South Korea where there are literally no guns. Cops are very suspicious of what drivers are doing behind a window, especially a tinted one like the Dolphins receiver. Anyways, listen to what Kimberly had to say regarding this whole situation.
I do think it was very mature of Tyreek Hill to give those comments yesterday. I think things can always seem clearer with the benefit of hindsight. However, my issue lies with the fact that so many people, unlike Tyreek Hill, didn't have the benefit of hindsight. What should I have done differently? Ooh, if I had not done this, because they're not here to tell their story. The issue here is excessive use of force. I understand that, you know, we can talk about the window, we can talk about all these things, but ultimately the reason the body cam video and what we saw on Twitter Sunday morning, why it affected so many of us that way is because of how how physical they were with him, how when he seemed to be compliant, how he was still treated. And so I think when I hear especially older generations talk about, you know, how to protect yourself, because these are the times we're living in, what that advice, while I understand it, it doesn't get to the root of the issue. It's we have to now brace ourselves for the world that is unfair. We have to change our behavior as opposed to talking about what the issue is. The world shouldn't be like that. Police officers, and again, I have tons of police officers in my family, friends, all that. But they are trained for these situations in a way that civilians are not. We don't know what it's like to be, it's panic. That is what we feel, right? In those moments. And as a Black woman, that video is triggering for me to watch, especially when I sit down next to other Black men and watch it. Because you can talk about how Tyreek should have done this had he not done that. Philando Castile, like we have so many names of people who don't have the benefit of being able to say, in that moment, I wish I had done something different, because their lives were taken. And so I get what Stephen's saying, but it's still, even for me as a woman, when older generations tell you, oh, don't dress a certain way because you don't want somebody to take advantage of you on the street. You don't, and that advice, while I understand it, it's not about what I'm wearing. It's about how about we figure out why is somebody trying to take advantage of me. That's the issue, not necessarily the dress, not necessarily the window, in my opinion. Stephen A., everything you said, especially the incidents that happened to you personally and your friends, that's sort of my point. I understand the world I'm a Black woman in America. I understand life is unfair and life is difficult, and there are different challenges that affect me in a way that they don't affect you and Jason and Molly. Like, those are realities. That doesn't make it right, though. And I think when you talk about Tyreek Hill, I wish he had said, you know, I should have acted differently sooner. Him saying that yesterday, I think it was mature. That doesn't change my stance on supporting what he is saying about how he was treated with the excessive force. That is my only argument here. What he said yesterday does not change how I watched that video and how angry I was, not just for me as a Black person in America, but also the Black men that I know, that I love, that are in my family, that are my friends, because that is a real fear. That is a real fear for all of us. But I understand you have to tailor our behavior, but again, that doesn't fix what is at the heart of the issue.
Okay, let me stop it here for a second. You can see Kimberly Martin is trying to make this racial. Again, go on YouTube and you'll find thousands of videos of cops using excessive force against people of all color. To me, Kimberly seems to think this only happens in our own community. It happens all over the US. It's easy to say that cops are trained professionals, but they are human, and I don't care how much training you receive. For most of these cops, these are life and death situations.